The rain was pounding so hard it sounded like gunfire, but Trevor Holden still heard the scream. "Don't! The tank could blow!" His hand closed on the door handle anyway, white hot. Skin stuck to metal and peeled away when he yanked. Inside the overturned sedan, an old woman hung limp from her seatbelt, blood running down her temple, flames already licking the dashboard. Sirens were 12 minutes out. Everyone else had formed a semicircle, phones up, faces lit by firelight, recording, waiting. Trevor thought about his 7-year-old daughter asleep at home, thought about what would happen to her if he died on this road. Then he thought about what he would want if that was his daughter trapped behind the glass, dying while strangers did nothing. He pulled the door. Nothing. He pulled again, teeth clenched against the smell of his own cooking flesh, but he didn't let go. Third time, the door tore open with a shriek louder than the storm. 60 seconds later, the woman was breathing on the asphalt, alive. 3 weeks later, she showed up unannounced at Trevor's front door and pressed a plain manila envelope into his hands. What was inside would hit the news 3 days after that, and Trevor Holden would never walk down a city street unrecognized again. This is the story of how one impossible choice in a storm led to a miracle no one saw coming. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel.
3 hours earlier, Trevor Holden had been trying to figure out how to explain to his 7-year-old daughter that they couldn't afford new shoes this month. He stood in their tiny apartment kitchen, staring at the bills spread across the counter. Electric, water, rent, groceries. The numbers swam before his eyes, and none of them added up the way he needed them to. His paycheck from the elementary school, where he worked as a janitor, had cleared that morning. After rent and utilities, he had $243 left for the month. $243 for food, gas, and everything else. And that was before he made his monthly deposit into the surgery fund. "Daddy," Trevor turned to find Sky standing in the doorway, her small hand trailing along the wall the way she always did when she moved through the apartment. She couldn't see the walls, couldn't see him, couldn't see anything. But she had memorized every inch of their home, every texture and corner and obstacle. "Hey, sweetheart." Trevor quickly shuffled the bills into a drawer. "You need something?" "Can you help me find my pink sweater? The one that's soft? The one Grandma Jean gave you from church?" "Uh-huh." Trevor walked over and took her hand, guiding her back to the bedroom they shared, though calling it shared was generous. Sky had the bedroom. Trevor had a pull-out couch in the living room with springs that dug into his back every night. But Sky needed the bedroom. She needed a space that was predictable, where everything stayed in the same place, where she could navigate safely in the darkness that was her constant companion.
He found the sweater folded in her drawer and handed it to her. Sky ran her fingers over it, feeling the texture, and smiled. "Thank you, Daddy." "You're welcome, baby." She tilted her head up toward him, not quite meeting his eyes, because she didn't know exactly where they were, but close. "Are you okay?" Trevor's chest tightened. Sky had always been perceptive. Now, without visual distractions, she picked up on every shift in his voice, every hesitation, every unspoken worry. "I'm fine. Just tired. It was a long day at work." "You're always tired. That's what happens when you get old." "You're not old. You're 33. "Ancient," Trevor said, forcing lightness into his voice. "Practically a dinosaur." Sky giggled, and the sound loosened something in Trevor's chest. That giggle was worth everything. Every double shift, every skipped meal, every night on that awful couch. "Can we read tonight? The one about the girl who goes to the secret garden?" "Absolutely. But first dinner. I'm making your favorite. Mac and cheese." "You guessed it." It was the third time that week they'd had mac and cheese, but Sky didn't complain. She never complained. Not about the simple meals, not about the fact that they couldn't afford the special Braille book she wanted, or the mobility training that would help her navigate the world beyond their apartment. She never complained about being blind. Trevor wished he could say the same about himself. As he boiled water for the pasta, his mind drifted to the folder hidden in his closet, the one with all the paperwork from the specialist in Portland, the one that said Sky's blindness wasn't permanent, the one that explained how a new surgical procedure could potentially restore her vision with an 80% success rate, the one with the price tag of $95,000.
After 2.5 years of saving every spare dollar, working extra shifts, cleaning offices at night, mowing lawns on weekends, skipping meals so Sky could eat. After all of that, Trevor had managed to save $14,917. At this rate, Sky would be in college before he could afford the surgery. If she lived long enough to make it to college. Trevor shook that thought away violently. Sky was healthy. Sky was strong. Sky was going to be fine, surgery or no surgery. She would adapt. She would thrive. Blind people lived full, beautiful lives she didn't need to see to be happy. But God, Trevor wanted her to see. He wanted her to see the ocean she loved listening to. He wanted her to see the colors she asked about constantly. What does blue look like, Daddy? What's the difference between yellow and orange? He wanted her to see his face when he told her he loved her, to see the world that was so much bigger and more beautiful than the darkness she'd known since she was 6 months old. He wanted her to see because she deserved to see, and because it was his fault she couldn't. The infection that had stolen Sky's vision had started small. Just a little redness, a little irritation, nothing to worry about, they'd thought. But Trevor and his wife Caroline had been young and broke without health insurance, and they'd waited. They'd tried home remedies. They told themselves it would get better on its own. By the time they scraped together enough money to see a doctor, the infection had spread to both eyes. The damage was catastrophic. Caroline had left 6 months later. Trevor pushed those memories down and focused on the present, on the water boiling, on the mac and cheese that would fill Sky's belly, on getting through tonight and then tomorrow, and then the day after that. One day at a time. That was all he could handle.
By 8 o'clock, Sky was in bed, tucked under her worn purple comforter, with her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. Trevor had read her 3 chapters of the Secret Garden book, doing different voices from Mary and Dickon and the Grumpy Gardener. Sky had laughed in all the right places. "Daddy?" she murmured sleepily. "Yeah, sweetheart? When I can see, the first thing I want to look at is your face." Trevor's throat went tight. "Yeah? Why's that?" "Because everyone at church says I look just like you. I want to know what that means." He reached down and smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "One day, baby. I promise." "I know," Sky said with simple faith that broke his heart. "You always keep your promises. Love you to the moon and back. Love you to the stars and further." Their nightly ritual complete, Trevor watched until Sky's breathing evened out into sleep. Then he returned to the living room and sank onto the couch, exhaustion hitting him like a wave. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The Weather Service had been warning about a major storm system moving in from the Pacific, one of the worst the region had seen in years, they said. Trevor made a mental note to check the windows and set out candles in case the power went out. He was about to start his nightly routine, checking locks, setting out Sky's clothes for tomorrow, maybe allowing himself a beer if there was one left in the fridge, when he remembered. They were out of milk. Sky loved her morning cereal. It was one of the few things she could prepare herself, measuring out the cereal by counting, pouring the milk carefully, eating independently while Trevor got ready for work. It was a small thing, but it mattered. It was one tiny piece of normalcy in a life that had very little of it. The corner store was only 5 minutes away. He could run there and back before the storm got too bad. Sky was asleep. She'd never even know he was gone. Trevor grabbed his keys and his wallet and headed out into the night.
The rain started before he made it to his truck. By the time Trevor pulled onto the coastal road, he was coming down in sheets, so thick his wipers could barely keep up. The wind rocked his aging pickup, and more than once Trevor considered turning back. But he was already halfway there, and Sky needed milk. He pressed on, hands tight on the wheel, squinting through the windshield. That was when he saw the flames.
At first, Trevor thought it was a trick of the light, rain and darkness playing games with his vision. But no. There, maybe a quarter-mile ahead, orange fire blazed against the black sky. As he got closer, he could see a crowd gathered on the shoulder of the road. Cars pulled over at odd angles, people standing in the rain, phones out, shouting. Trevor pulled over and jumped out of the truck before he'd even fully processed what he was seeing. A car was flipped upside down and on fire, completely engulfed. And through the flames, through the smoke, he could see a figure slumped in the driver's seat. "Is someone inside?" Trevor shouted, pushing through the crowd. "An old woman," someone yelled back. "The door's jammed. We can't get her out." "Did anyone try?" The faces around him were pale with fear. A man in a business suit shook his head violently. "It's going to explode, man. The whole thing's going to blow up." "The fire department's on the way," a woman added, her voice shaking. "They'll be here soon." How soon? Trevor wanted to ask. 5 minutes? 10? The woman inside didn't have 5 minutes. She didn't have 2. Through the flames, Trevor could see her more clearly now. Silver hair, delicate features, completely motionless. Smoke poured into the car through every crack. For a split second, Trevor thought about his own life, about Skye asleep at home, about what would happen to her if he died here on this road, about the fact that he was all she had in the world. And then he thought about what he would want if that was Skye in the car. If his daughter was trapped and dying while strangers stood by and watched and did nothing. Trevor ran toward the burning car. Behind him, someone screamed.
The heat hit him like a wall. Trevor raised his arm to shield his face and pushed forward. The metal of the door handle seared his palm when he grabbed it, but he pulled. Hard. The door didn't budge. He pulled again, putting his full weight into it, his hand screaming in pain. Nothing. Through the window, he could see the woman's chest barely rising and falling. Smoke filled the interior completely now. She had seconds, maybe less. Trevor braced his foot against the car's frame and pulled with everything he had. The door gave way with a screech of twisted metal. Smoke poured out in a choking wave. Trevor plunged his hands into it, feeling for the woman, finding her seatbelt, fumbling with the release. His lungs burned. His eyes watered so badly he could barely see. His hands felt like they were on fire. The seatbelt clicked free. He grabbed the woman under her arms and pulled. Her weight shifted against him and they fell backward together onto the wet pavement, 10 feet from the burning car. Trevor rolled her onto her back, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. No pulse. Her chest wasn't moving. Trevor positioned his hands on her sternum and started compressions. Press, 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 breathe. Press, 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 breathe. The rain soaked through his clothes. Behind him, someone was crying. Someone else was shouting about the fire department. Trevor kept going. His arms burned, his vision blurred. Come on, stay with me." The woman coughed. It was weak, barely audible over the storm, but it was there. Trevor rolled her onto her side as she coughed again, expelling smoke from her lungs. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, frightened, alive. "You're okay," Trevor told her, his voice shaking. "You're safe. Help is coming." Behind them, the car exploded in a burst of flames that lit up the entire street. Had he waited any longer, 5 more minutes, and she'd never have made it out. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes after Trevor pulled the woman from the flames. By then, she was breathing on her own, weak, labored breaths that rattled in her chest, but breathing. Trevor knelt beside her on the wet pavement, his right hand cradled against his chest, trying not to think about the pain radiating up his arm. The paramedics took over immediately, checking her vitals, loading her onto a stretcher. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, crouched down beside Trevor. "Sir, I need to look at your hand. I'm fine." "You're not fine. Let me see." Trevor held out his right hand. Even in the darkness, the damage was obvious. The skin across his palm and fingers was blistered and raw, already swelling. When the paramedic gently turned his hand over, Trevor hissed in pain.
"You need to go to the hospital," she said firmly. "I can't. My daughter, she's home alone. She's only 7. "Sir, just bandage it. Please. I need to get home." The paramedic looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Trevor's face must have convinced her. She worked quickly, cooling the burn with sterile water, applying ointment that made Trevor's eyes water, wrapping his entire hand in layers of clean white gauze. "This is a 2nd-degree burn, maybe 3rd degree in some spots. You need to see a doctor within 24 hours. If it gets infected, I'll go tomorrow, I promise." A police officer took his statement. People called him a hero. Someone had filmed everything. Trevor barely heard any of it. All he could think about was getting home to Sky. He drove back through the storm with his left hand on the wheel, his right hand throbbing with every heartbeat. The rain had somehow gotten worse. Lightning split the sky, thunder shook the truck. Trevor had forgotten to get the milk. When he finally pushed through the apartment door, dripping wet and exhausted, the first thing he did was check on Sky. She was exactly where he'd left her, curled up with her stuffed rabbit, breathing softly, completely unaware that her father had just walked through fire. Trevor sank onto the edge of her bed and watched her sleep. His hand throbbed, his clothes were soaked, he smelled like smoke and rain and burned metal.
But Sky was safe. The woman from the car was alive, and somehow, despite everything, Trevor had made it home. He sat there for a long time, watching his daughter breathe, tears slipping silently down his face. Tomorrow, he would go back to work. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to use his burned hand to push a mop and carry trash bags. Tomorrow, he would keep saving for a surgery that seemed impossibly far away. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel the weight of it all, the exhaustion, the pain, the constant, crushing pressure of being one person trying to be everything for a child who deserved so much more. "I'm trying, Sky," he whispered. "I promise I'm trying." Sky stirred, but didn't wake. Trevor leaned down and kissed her forehead, then retreated to the living room. He changed out of his wet clothes, pulled out the couch, and lay down on the worn springs. Sleep didn't come for a long time, but when it did, Trevor dreamed of fire and smoke and a woman's eyes opening in the rain. Life returned to hard reality. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of pain and routine. Trevor's hand healed slowly. The bandages came off after 5 days, revealing pink, tender skin that looked like it had been melted and reformed. Every task hurt, gripping the mop handle, carrying trash bags, even buttoning his shirt. But he pushed through it because he had no choice. Work, home, Sky, repeat. The story of the rescue had made local news. A few reporters tried to contact Trevor, but he ignored their calls. He didn't want attention. He didn't want to be called a hero. He had done what anyone should have done, what he would have wanted someone to do if that was his family in the car. That was all. The fundraising page for Sky's surgery remained stagnant at $3,000. Bills continued to pile up. Trevor picked up an extra weekend shift cleaning a medical office across town. The extra $60 went straight into the surgery fund. $14,977 now. Only $80,000 to go.
Trevor tried not to think about how impossible that number was. He focused on the present, on making Sky smile, on reading to her every night, on making sure she never felt the weight of their circumstances. On a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after the storm, Trevor was mopping the hallway at Cedar Harbor Elementary when his phone rang. Unknown number, Portland area code. He almost didn't answer. "Hello? Mr. Holden? This is Portland Children's Hospital calling." Trevor's heart stuttered. Had something happened to Sky? But no, she was at her special education program. They would have called him directly if something was wrong. "Yes?" he managed. "I'm calling to confirm the surgery date for your daughter, Sky. We have an opening next Thursday, November 7th. Will that work for you?" Trevor stopped moving. The mop handle slipped from his burned hand and clattered to the floor. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. What surgery? The vision restoration procedure. The woman on the phone sounded confused. For Sky Holden? Everything has been scheduled and... There must be a mistake, Trevor interrupted. His pulse pounded in his ears. I don't have the money for that surgery. I've been saving, but I'm nowhere close to the amount needed. Sir, the surgery has been paid for, in full. All $95,000. There's no cost to you. The hallway tilted. Trevor reached out to steady himself against the wall. That's not possible. There's been a mistake. Who paid for it? I don't have that information, I'm afraid. The donor wished to remain anonymous. All I can tell you is that everything has been taken care of. The surgery, the hospital stay, all follow-up appointments, medication, everything. Your only responsibility is to bring Sky to the hospital on the scheduled date. Trevor couldn't speak. His mind raced through possibilities. The fundraising page? But $3,000 wouldn't even cover a fraction of the cost. A charity? A medical foundation? Had he applied for something and forgotten? Mr. Holden, are you still there?
Yes. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Yes, I'm here. So will Thursday, November 7th work for you? We'd need to admit Sky the night before for pre-op. Thursday, Trevor repeated numbly. Yes, that works. The woman gave him more details. Admission time, what to bring, pre-surgery instructions. Trevor fumbled for a pen and wrote it all down on his hand, the burned one, barely feeling the pain. When the call ended, he stood in the empty school hallway, phone clutched in his shaking hand, and tried to understand what had just happened. $95,000, paid in full, anonymous donor. Who would do that? Who could do that? Trevor's legs gave out. He sank to the floor, his back against the wall, and stared at the words written across his scarred palm. Sky was going to see. After 7 years of darkness, after 2.5 years of Trevor working himself into the ground, trying to save enough money, after nights of lying awake wondering if he would ever be able to give his daughter this gift, she was going to see. Trevor put his face in his hands and wept. November 7th arrived both too quickly and not quickly enough. Trevor took Sky to Portland, to the hospital that had seemed like an impossible dream. She was nervous but excited, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Will it hurt, Daddy?" "The doctors will give you medicine so you won't feel anything." "How long will it take?" "A few hours, but it'll feel like no time at all to you because you'll be sleeping." "Will you be there when I wake up?" "I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise." The surgery was scheduled for 9 a.m. They came for Sky at 8:30. Trevor walked alongside the gurney as they wheeled her to the operating room, holding her small hand in his scarred one.
I love you to the moon and back, he whispered as they reached the double doors. Love you to the stars and further, Sky murmured. She sounded brave, but terrified. Trevor had to let go of her hand. The doors swung closed between them. And then she was gone. 4 hours. That's how long the surgery took. 4 hours of Trevor sitting in the waiting room, unable to eat, unable to read, unable to do anything but stare at the clock and pray. He thought about the mysterious donor. He'd called the hospital a dozen times trying to get more information, but they either didn't know or weren't allowed to say. Everything had been handled by a private legal firm. The money had been transferred directly. The donor had insisted on complete anonymity. He'd even gone back to the site of the accident, hoping to find some clue, but there was nothing there except burned pavement and skid marks. Whoever had saved them wanted to remain hidden. At 1:47 p.m., the surgeon emerged from the operating room. Trevor shot to his feet. "How is she?" The surgeon, Dr. Martinez, a woman in her 50s with steady hands and kind eyes, smiled. "The procedure went perfectly, better than we could have hoped." Trevor's knees nearly buckled. Better than... what does that mean? The damage was extensive, but not as severe as the scans indicated. We were able to repair both optic nerves and restore the retinal tissue completely. When the swelling goes down and the bandages come off, Sky should have full vision, no limitations. Full vision, Trevor repeated.
The words didn't feel real. "I'm very optimistic, Mr. Holden. Your daughter is strong. She did beautifully." Trevor couldn't respond. He just stood there, tears streaming down his face, while Dr. Martinez squeezed his shoulder. "You can see her in about an hour. She'll be groggy from the anesthesia, but she's asking for you." Skye's eyes were covered in thick white bandages when Trevor was finally allowed into the recovery room. She looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors, but she was smiling.
"Daddy?"
"I'm here, sweetheart." Trevor took her hand carefully, mindful of the IV.
"Did it work?"
"Dr. Martinez says it went perfectly, better than perfect."
"So I'll be able to see?"
"When the bandages come off, yes." Skye's smile widened.
"What do you look like, Daddy? Describe yourself to me."
Trevor laughed through his tears. "Well, let's see. I've got brown hair that's too long because I keep putting off haircuts, green eyes that are probably pretty red right now from crying, a nose that's a little crooked because I broke it playing football in high school, and I definitely need to shave."
"You sound perfect."
"You're a little biased, baby." "I love you, Daddy."
"I love you too. So much."
The bandages would stay on for 5 days. 5 days of Skye healing, of Trevor barely leaving her side, of nurses checking her vitals, and doctors monitoring her progress. 5 days of waiting to see if the miracle was real. The 5 days slipped away faster than Trevor realized. The bandage removal was scheduled for 10 a.m. Trevor had barely slept the night before. What if something had gone wrong? What if the surgery hadn't worked? What if they removed the bandages and Skye still couldn't see? He held her hand as Dr. Martinez carefully unwrapped the gauze, layer by layer. Skye's face was scrunched up, uncertain. The lights in the room had been dimmed to protect her sensitive eyes. "Okay, Skye," Dr. Martinez said gently. "I'm going to remove the last layer of gauze now. Keep your eyes closed for me." Trevor squeezed Skye's hand. His heart hammered against his ribs. The final layer of gauze came away. "All right. Very slowly, I want you to open your eyes for me, just a little bit at first." Skye's eyelids fluttered, opened, blinked once, twice, and then she turned her head toward Trevor.
For a long moment, neither of them moved. Skye's eyes, beautiful blue eyes that Trevor had only seen closed or covered for so long, tracked across his face, learning every line, every feature, every detail she had only known through touch and description. "Daddy?" she whispered. Trevor couldn't speak. He could barely breathe. "You have brown hair," Skye continued, her voice full of wonder. "And your eyes are green, really green, like the grass you told me about, like spring." A tear rolled down Trevor's cheek. Skye reached up and touched it. "You're crying." "Happy tears," Trevor managed. "These are happy tears." "And you do need to shave." Skye smiled, that brilliant smile that lit up her whole face. "You're beautiful, Daddy." Trevor pulled her into his arms and held her while his shoulders shook with sobs. Dr. Martinez quietly excused herself, giving them privacy. "Can I see everything?" Skye asked against his chest. "Can I see the sky and the ocean and the colors and the world?" "You can see everything, baby. Everything." "I want to see the stars tonight." "Then we'll look at the stars tonight. I promise." They stayed in Portland for 2 more days while Dr. Martinez monitored Skye's recovery. Everything looked perfect, better than perfect. Skye's vision was 20/20. No complications, no concerns. On November 14th, they drove home to Cedar Harbor. Skye pressed her face against the passenger window the entire drive, watching the world blur past. Trees, signs, other cars, the ocean in the distance, everything she had only experienced through sound and touch and imagination. "It's so big," she kept saying. "Everything is so big, Daddy." When they pulled up to their apartment building, Skye looked at it like she was seeing it for the first time, because she was. "This is where we live?" "This is home," Trevor confirmed. Can I see my room? Of course. Inside, Sky moved through the apartment slowly, touching everything, seeing it with her eyes now instead of just her hands. The kitchen table where they ate dinner, the couch where Trevor slept, the bedroom with her stuffed animals and books and music box. It's smaller than I thought, she said, not in a disappointed way, just observing. Yeah, Trevor agreed. It's pretty small. But it wouldn't be small forever, he reminded himself. He still had his job. He still had his savings. They would be okay. They had made it this far. They would keep going. Sky could see now. That was what mattered. Everything else was just details. Life returned to a new kind of normal. Sky started regular classes at Cedar Harbor Elementary, no longer needing special education. She struggled at first, learning to read print instead of Braille, keeping up with classmates who had years of visual learning ahead of her. But she worked hard. She adapted. She thrived. Trevor worked his shifts, still cleaning hallways and bathrooms, still counting pennies, still sleeping on the pull-out couch, but everything felt different now. Lighter, like a weight he hadn't known he was carrying, had finally been lifted. He still thought about the mysterious donor, still wondered who had given his daughter the gift of sight, still wanted to say thank you to someone, anyone. But the trail had gone completely cold. Until 3 weeks after they returned home, when someone knocked on the apartment door. Trevor answered it without thinking, and froze. An elderly woman stood in the hallway, silver hair perfectly styled, elegant clothes, kind eyes that looked familiar somehow. Behind her stood a man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Holden?" "Yes?" "My name is Lauren Rhodes." She paused, letting the name sink in. "I believe we've met before, though the circumstances were rather dramatic."
And suddenly, Trevor understood why those eyes looked familiar. The face that had been slack with unconsciousness, now animated and warm. The silver hair that had been wild and smoke-stained, now perfectly styled. The woman from the burning car. Trevor's voice failed. "You're alive." "Thanks to you," Lauren said gently. "May I come in?" Trevor stepped aside, suddenly mortified by the state of the apartment. The worn furniture, the cramped space, the evidence of poverty in every corner. But Lauren didn't seem to notice. She entered and looked around with curiosity, not judgment. Her gaze landed on the shelf of audiobooks, the Braille learning materials that Sky no longer needed, the small touches throughout the apartment designed to help a blind child navigate. "Daddy?" Sky called from her room. "Who is it?" "A visitor, sweetheart. Come say hello." Sky emerged, and Trevor watched Lauren's face carefully. When Lauren saw the little girl, saw her bright eyes tracking the room, saw her looking at this new visitor with obvious curiosity, something shifted in her expression, something soft and wondering. "You can see," Lauren said quietly. It wasn't a question. Sky nodded proudly. "I had surgery. A really nice person paid for it. We don't know who, but Daddy says they must be an angel." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Trevor, and in that moment, he understood everything. "It was you," he said. "You paid for her surgery." "It was the least I could do." "The least you—" Trevor shook his head. "Mrs. Rhodes, that surgery cost $95,000. "I'm aware. I'm also aware that you ran into a burning car to save my life, while everyone else stood and watched, while people were screaming at you to stop. You didn't hesitate." Trevor couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. "I was conscious. Before the smoke became too much, I was conscious. I saw the crowd standing there, watching. I saw them do nothing while I died." She paused, collecting herself. "And then I saw you." She looked at Sky.
then back at Trevor. When I woke up in the hospital, my first thought was that I needed to find the man who saved me. I run a shipping company, Mr. Holden. Rhodes Shipping. It's been in my family for 3 generations. I have resources. Finding you wasn't difficult. Trevor's mind spun. Rhodes Shipping. He'd heard of it. Everyone in Cedar Harbor had. It was one of the largest shipping operations on the West Coast, which meant Lauren Rhodes was... When I learned about your daughter, Lauren said softly, about the surgery she needed, about how hard you'd been working to save enough money, she stopped, overcome. I knew immediately what I had to do. Mrs. Rhodes, Trevor managed, I don't know how to. I can never repay. You already have. Lauren's voice was firm now. You gave me my life, Mr. Holden. There is no repayment for that. There is only gratitude. She gestured to the man with the briefcase. He stepped forward and opened it, revealing thick folders of documents. This is my lawyer, Gerald Finch. He's prepared several things for your review. Trevor took the folder with trembling hands. As he opened it and began reading, his vision blurred. An educational trust fund for Sky, covering everything from elementary school through college and graduate studies, fully funded. A housing grant, enough to purchase a home, a real home, with bedrooms and a yard. Health insurance for both of them. Comprehensive coverage for life. And at the bottom of the stack, a formal job offer. I'm establishing a foundation, Lauren explained as Trevor stared at the papers. The Holden Foundation. Its mission will be to help single parents facing medical crises for their children. Parents like you. Parents who work multiple jobs and still can't afford to save their children. She paused, letting it sink in. I want you to run it. You would be the foundation's director. You would decide which families receive support, how we allocate resources, how we make a real difference in people's lives. Her voice softened. Who better to lead such an organization than someone who has lived it?
Trevor looked up from the papers. Why would you do all of this? Lauren was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I'm 70 years old, Mr. Holden. I've spent my entire life building an empire. Rhodes Shipping employs thousands of people. We move goods all over the world. On paper, I'm worth more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. She looked at Sky, who was watching them both with wide, curious eyes. But I never had children, never had a family. I was so focused on building, on achieving, on proving that a woman could succeed in a man's world, that I forgot to ask myself what any of it was for. Her gaze returned to Trevor. When I was trapped in that car, watching the flames grow closer, knowing I was going to die, I didn't think about my company. I didn't think about my wealth or my legacy or my achievements. I thought about how alone I was, how no one would truly mourn me, how I had spent 70 years accumulating things that meant absolutely nothing. A tear slipped down her cheek. And then you appeared, a stranger, a man who had nothing by the world's standards, and you risked everything to save me. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know I could repay you. You just saw a person who needed help. She reached out and took Trevor's hands, the scarred one and the good one. You showed me something that night that all my money could never buy. You showed me that there's still good in this world, that there are still people who run toward danger instead of away from it, that kindness exists even when it costs everything. Her grip tightened. I can't repay that, but I can spend whatever time I have left trying to honor it. This foundation, your foundation, will help hundreds of families, thousands maybe, children who are sick, parents who are desperate, and every single one of them will be helped because you ran into a fire to save a stranger.
Trevor couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. His entire body shook with the weight of everything he was feeling. It was Sky who broke the silence.
She walked over to Lauren and took her hand. She said, "Thank you for helping my daddy," she said simply. "And thank you for letting me see. I really like seeing." Lauren laughed, a bright, genuine sound, and squeezed Sky's hand. "You're very welcome, sweetheart. I really like that you can see too." Then Sky looked up at Lauren with those bright blue eyes and smiled. "Can I call you Grandma Lauren?" Lauren's composure finally cracked. She pulled Sky into a hug and held her while tears rolled down her face. "I would be honored." The Holden Foundation launched on a bright spring morning 6 months later. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest, just local officials, a few reporters, and the families who would be the foundation's first recipients of aid. Lauren Rhodes stood beside Trevor as he cut the ribbon, both of them smiling for the cameras. But the real work happened in the weeks and months that followed. Trevor threw himself into the foundation with the same determination he'd once poured into saving for Sky's surgery. He reviewed applications from desperate parents. He made phone calls to hospitals and specialists. He sat with families in waiting rooms and held crying mothers who thought they were out of options. And one by one, the foundation gave them hope. A single mother in Eugene whose son needed a kidney transplant, funded. A father in Bend whose daughter had leukemia and no insurance, funded. A grandmother raising her grandson who needed life-saving heart surgery, funded. In its first year, the Holden Foundation helped 217 families. 217 children received medical care they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. 217 parents learned that they weren't alone.
Sky became the foundation's unofficial mascot. Now 8 years old and thriving, she attended events with Trevor, met the families they helped, and told everyone about the night her father ran into a fire and pulled an angel from the flames. "That's not exactly how it happened," Trevor would say, embarrassed by the attention. "It's exactly how it happened," Sky would insist. "You saved Grandma Lauren, and she saved us." And Lauren, who visited their new home at least twice a week, who had become family in every way that mattered, would simply smile and nod. "Your daughter is right," she would tell Trevor. "That's exactly what happened." Cedar Harbor grew to love the strange little family that had formed from tragedy. The single father who had worked as a janitor now ran a foundation that was changing lives across Oregon. The blind girl who used to navigate by touch now read books and painted pictures and played soccer with the neighborhood kids. And the billionaire shipping magnate who had built an empire alone now had a family she'd never expected to find. They had dinner together every Sunday. Lauren would bring groceries, always too much, always insisting she'd accidentally bought extra. Trevor would cook, usually something simple because he was still learning. Sky would set the table and chatter about school and friends and everything she'd seen that week. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. It was family. One Sunday evening, as they sat on the porch of Trevor's new house, a modest 3-bedroom with a yard where Sky and her new puppy, Biscuit, could play, Lauren asked the question she'd been holding on to for months.
"Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Trevor considered it. "All the time," he admitted. "I think about how many ways it could have gone differently. How I almost turned back because of the storm. How I was just going for milk. How if I'd left 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, I would have missed the whole thing." "But you didn't," Lauren said softly. "No, I didn't." "Why?" Lauren pressed. "Why did you run toward the fire when everyone else ran away?" Trevor thought about all the easy answers. Because it was the right thing to do. Because someone needed help. Because he couldn't live with himself if he hadn't tried. But the real answer was simpler than that. Because I thought about Sky. I thought about what I would want someone to do if she was trapped in that car. And then I couldn't not do it. Lauren nodded slowly. You know what the difference is between you and everyone else who was standing there that night? What? You saw a person. Not a risk, not a calculation of cost and benefit, just a person who needed help. She reached over and squeezed his hand, the scarred one that had pulled her from the flames. That's rare, Trevor. Rarer than you know. I don't think it is. I think most people would do the same thing if they were in that moment. Then why didn't they? Trevor didn't have an answer for that. Skye burst out of the house with Biscuit tumbling after her, breaking the heavy moment. "Daddy, Grandma Lauren, come see what Biscuit learned. He can shake hands." They spent the rest of the evening watching a puppy who barely knew what his paws were doing attempt to perform tricks. Skye laughed until she had hiccups. Lauren smiled more in that 1 hour than she probably had in the entire year before the fire. And Trevor watched his daughter, the little girl who could see the world now, who had a future full of possibilities, who would never know poverty or desperation the way he had, and felt something he almost forgotten was possible: peace.
5 years after the storm, Cedar Harbor erected a memorial at the site of the accident. It was a small thing, a bronze plaque mounted on a stone marker, surrounded by a carefully tended garden. But it told the story of what had happened on that October night, how a single father's act of courage had changed not just 2 lives, but hundreds. Trevor brought Skye to the dedication ceremony. She was 12 now, tall and healthy and bright-eyed, with her mother's blonde curls and her father's kind heart. She could read the plaque herself, no longer needing anyone to describe the words to her. "It's nice," Skye said, studying the memorial, "but it's missing something." "What's that?" Trevor asked. "The part about how we became a family." She looked up at him with those clear blue eyes. "That's the most important part." "You're absolutely right," Lauren said, appearing beside them. She moved more slowly now at 75, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "The plaque talks about heroism and courage, but it doesn't talk about love." Trevor looked at the two of them, his daughter and the woman who had become family in every way that mattered, and felt his throat tighten. "Come on," he said, his voice rough. "Let's go home. I think someone promised to make her famous chocolate chip cookies today." "That was you, Daddy. You promised." "Did I? Well, then I better keep that promise." "Can we get ice cream too?" Skye asked, hopefully. "Absolutely not," Trevor said. Then at her look, "Fine, 1 scoop." "2 scoops," Lauren countered. "I'm buying." "You always buy everything, Grandma Lauren." "That's what grandmas are for." They walked away from the memorial together, hand in hand, laughing about cookies and ice cream and whether Biscuit would be allowed to have a bite. Behind them, the bronze plaque gleamed in the afternoon sun, a permanent reminder of courage and sacrifice. But the real legacy wasn't carved in metal. It was walking down the street right now, arguing about dessert. It was a little girl who could see the sky and the ocean and the whole beautiful world. It was a man who had learned that sometimes the hardest choices become the most important moments of our lives. It was a woman who had discovered that wealth means nothing without someone to share it with. It was a family built not from blood, but from something stronger, from courage, from gratitude, from the simple, powerful choice to help another human being. And they all lived, not perfectly, not without struggles, but together, which was all that really mattered in the end. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you, kindness still matters. Compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.